I grew up in a reasonably small house. For most of my childhood, I shared a bedroom with my older brother. Two twin beds on opposite sides of the room, two dressers, two closets. There wasn't even room for a desk. It wasn't claustrophobic exactly, but it certainly wasn't comfortable. So when my brother left for college, I immediately moved his bed out and basically took over his side of the room. With his permission, of course. Finally, a bedroom desk felt essential. No more doing homework in the basement or at my dad's office. That setup worked perfectly for 2 years until I went off to college and didn't live at home anymore, so it didn't really matter. After graduating, my brother landed a city job near our hometown, so we moved back into my parents' house. The first thing he did was reclaim the bedroom I'd spent months renovating. I was a little annoyed, but my parents pointed out I'd done the same to him years earlier, so it evened out. I couldn't really argue, and I accepted it. When I graduated, I also found a city job and moved back home like my brother. Only problem, there was no room for me. The only spare bedroom left was the upstairs guest room, half the size of my old room, but it would have to do. The guest room sat right next to my dad's office, the only other room on that floor, and it was directly above the garage. That meant every time someone hit the garage door button, the whole floor vibrated for the 10 seconds it took the door to open. Because the room sat on the corner and overhung the house a bit, it had two windows on intersecting walls, one looking down the driveway, the other down the side of the house. It wasn't ideal, but it was private and usually quiet. This incident happened on a Friday evening when I was home alone. My brother was in Baltimore for some work-related conference, and my parents were spending the night at our family show house like they usually did on summer weekends. I'd had an absolutely brutal day at work and decided not to go out. I wanted to order food and call it an early night. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was lying in bed reading, trying to unwind. The house was completely quiet. A nice change from the usual chaos when everyone's home. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of the garage door starting to rise and the familiar vibration of the floor beneath me. It took a moment for it to register. None of my family should have been home. My parents had said they'd be at the show house through Sunday night, and my brother wasn't due back until Saturday afternoon. The realization arrived slowly, then hit my chest like a punch. My heart started racing. I jumped out of bed and looked toward the driveway, but it was too dark to make anything out. I could see the garage door open, but I couldn't tell if a car was inside or who'd opened it. Without overthinking it, I dug through the closet until I found one of the old baseball bats my parents had kept since my younger days. As I crept to the stairs, I tried to tell myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe my parents forgot something and came back. Maybe my brother's plans changed, or the door glitched and opened on its own. At the bottom of the stairs, just before turning the corner toward the bedrooms, I heard faint voices coming from the far side of the house. Too quiet to make out words, but clearly more than one person. That's when I knew someone had broken in. I dialed 911 and whispered our address to the operator, telling them the house was being burglarized. I left the line open and tucked the phone into my pocket like they instructed. The operator told me to stay put and keep quiet. But I felt this overwhelming, irrational pull to do something. I couldn't sit and wait. Against the operator's advice, I decided to act. I crept down the hallway toward the voices, the bat clutched tight in both hands. As I approached my parents' bedroom, I heard drawers being rifled through and things being tossed. They were searching for valuables. I drew a deep breath, fully aware I was probably making a stupid choice, but unable to stop myself. I shouted at the top of my lungs to startle them, then barreled into the room with the bat raised. Two men were rifling through my mother's closet. They both yelped when I burst in. They clearly hadn't expected anyone to be home, let alone someone willing to fight back. That surprise gave me a burst of courage, even though I was outnumbered. I swung at the nearer man and connected with his leg. He cursed, stumbled, and fell over. As I turned to the other man, he dropped his shoulder and tackled me before I could get a second swing in. We hit the floor hard, and it was obvious he was much bigger and stronger than me. He wrenched the bat away without much effort, then wrapped his hands around my throat and started choking me. I fought like crazy, clawing at his hands, trying to break free. Then I saw the other man crawling back toward us with something in his hand that looked like a knife. In that instant, I realized I'd made a dangerous mistake by confronting them. I thought I was about to die. I started to accept that this might be the end. And the only thought in my head was how devastated my mom would be. Then, faint in the distance, I heard police sirens. The last thing I remember is the second man grabbing my bat and swinging it at my head. Everything went black. When I came to, someone was gently shaking me. A police officer was kneeling beside me, asking if I was okay. I was dazed and disoriented. It took a few seconds to put the pieces together. The door from my parents' bedroom to the backyard was wide open. The intruders had clearly knocked me out and escaped through the back when they heard the sirens. The officer told me not to move much in case I had a concussion. My head throbbed, but I was coherent, which felt like a small mercy. Paramedics checked me and recommended going to the hospital, but I refused. I told the officers everything I could. How it happened, what I saw. They said they were searching the neighborhood for suspects, but by the time they arrived, the men were long gone. The police canvassed the area and followed a few leads, but the men were never found. My parents were furious when I called to tell them. They yelled that I was reckless for confronting the intruders. And they were right. If I'd hid as the operator suggested, the police might have caught them. Still, something about the break-in nagged at me afterward. All the doors had been locked that night, and the only way the garage door could have opened was via a small wireless button in my dad's car that he'd programmed. There was no way someone random would have known to use that. Up to that point, I'd never even locked my car when it was parked in the driveway, so whoever broke in must have known about that lax habit too. Even more disturbing was the timing. They somehow knew my parents would be away, and that my brother would be out of town. Whoever it was knew far too much about our family's routines. My parents installed a full security system the minute they returned from the show house. Cameras, motion sensors, automated lights, the whole works. My dad got paranoid for a long time after that, convinced the burglars must have been close to the family. I won't say that night changed me in some melodramatic, life-defining way, but there's a subtle, irreversible shift that happens after you've truly believed you were about to die. Life before that acceptance and life after it are different. I still remember the dissociating calm that crept in as I started to accept my fate. Nothing ever quite duplicates that feeling. This happened about 6 months ago, and honestly, I'm still rattled by just how deliberate and personal the whole thing felt. At the time, I had just moved back to my hometown to help care for my aging mother, who lives about 20 minutes away from me. I found a modest little duplex that was perfect, close enough to get to her quickly if she needed me, but far enough away that I still had my own space and independence. My mom's been having some health struggles recently. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but she's had a few minor falls around the house. And if you know her, you know how stubborn she is about accepting help. I've been begging her to get one of those medical alert devices, but she keeps brushing me off, saying I'm just being overprotective. It's been a constant source of stress. I hate the thought of her being alone most of the time, especially if something serious were to happen. On this particular evening, I was just settling in for the night. Around 9 p.m., I was on the couch watching TV when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a local number I didn't recognize. Since I was still fairly new to the area, I figured it might be important and answered. The woman on the other end introduced herself as a nurse from a nearby emergency room. She said my mother had been brought in about an hour earlier after falling and hitting her head. According to her, Mom was conscious but asking for me, and they wanted to know if I could get to the hospital quickly. My stomach dropped. This was exactly the kind of call I'd been dreading ever since moving back, and I didn't doubt the legitimacy of the call for a second. The woman knew my mom's full name, her address, and even mentioned the hip replacement surgery she'd had just a few months prior. I froze for only a second, then jumped into action, trying to keep calm, whispering a quick prayer under my breath. I didn't even think about locking the house. I just grabbed my keys, pulled the front door shut behind me, and sped off. The drive to the hospital was pure torture. My brain wouldn't stop running through scenarios, and almost none of them ended well. When I arrived, I rushed straight to the reception desk, gave them my mother's name, and told them I had just received a call saying she'd been admitted. The nurse looked puzzled, checked the computer, and said there was no record of my mom being admitted or treated that night. I insisted there had to be some mistake. I explained the phone call I'd just received, but the receptionist was firm. No record, no admission. She gently suggested I try calling my mom directly to make sure she was okay. So I stepped outside and called her landline. She picked up groggy and said she'd been asleep. She was fine. She wanted to know why I was calling so late. I didn't tell her what had happened. I just said I was checking in, told her to go back to bed, and hung up. That's when the crushing realization hit me. I'd been set up. Someone had tricked me into leaving my house empty. I jumped back into my car, furious at myself for falling for it. When I pulled into my driveway, the front door looked exactly as I'd left it, shut tight. For half a second, I thought maybe I was just paranoid. But the second I stepped inside, I knew I'd been robbed. The place was trashed. My TV was gone. My laptop was gone. The small jewelry collection I kept in my bedroom, gone. But what really threw me off were the bizarre things they'd taken along with the valuables. They had removed family photos from their frames. Not the frames, just the pictures themselves. They had emptied my prescription bottles from the bathroom cabinet and taken them too. These weren't things of great monetary value, but they carried huge personal meaning. It felt sadistic. And tell me this. Why would a thief take family photos? There's simply no reason. I called the police immediately, but deep down, I already knew it was pointless. Whoever had broken in was long gone. I gave the officers every detail I could, even repeating the phone call word for word. After listening, they agreed with my conclusion. Whoever was on the other end of that line knew far too much about me and my mother for it to be random. And that's what scared me most. I couldn't even begin to think of who could possibly know all of that information, or how they'd gotten it. The officers basically told me to call back if I ever had something concrete. Then they left, and I was just baffled. Imagine how unsettling it is, realizing some stranger knows enough about your life to lure you out of your house with a single phone call. The theft itself was bad, sure. But the fact that they deliberately targeted personal things like photos and medical information, that suggested this wasn't about quick cash. I kept thinking, maybe this was setting the stage for something bigger. Identity theft, or some other scheme that required deeply personal documentation. But weeks went by, and nothing else happened. Still, I couldn't shake the belief that the information had leaked through my mom somehow. She's social, especially for her age, and I could absolutely see her mentioning personal details to the wrong person without realizing it. I've warned her about this for years, but this time, she finally agreed to be more cautious. Even so, I can't escape the feeling that we're being watched, that whoever did this isn't finished. I did install a Ring camera recently, so I'm hoping that's enough of a deterrent. If anything else happens, I'll send an update. I'm a single guy, in my early 30s, and I've been living alone in this rented house for a little over a year. It's a cozy place, in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing flashy, but comfortable, affordable, and honestly, I'd settled into a routine that made it feel like home. This particular incident happened on a Thursday night around 11 p.m. I was winding down for bed when I heard aggressive pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock. Heavy, deliberate pounding, like someone was trying to break it down. I peered out the window, but thanks to the poorly positioned porch light, I couldn't see much. Despite the aggression, I wasn't exactly scared. I'm a pretty big guy, strong enough to hold my own. Mostly I was just irritated and confused. I opened the door cautiously, leaving the screen door locked as a barrier. I wasn't sure what to expect, but what I saw left me stunned. Standing there was a man, maybe a few years older than me. Average height, disheveled hair, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them for days. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he carried himself. Unstable, eyes darting wildly, pacing like he couldn't keep still. His breathing was heavy, almost frantic, as though he'd been running or was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. Before I could say a word, he started shouting that this was his house. He demanded I let him in, accused me of trespassing, and threatened to call the police if I didn't leave immediately. I thought maybe he was on drugs, or in the middle of some mental health crisis. Maybe both. I tried to reason with him, explaining he had the wrong house, but that only agitated him more. And then he rattled off details that froze me where I stood. He knew things about the house that you could never know from standing outside. Things only someone who'd actually lived there would know. He described how the master bedroom door was poorly designed and hid the toilet when opened. He knew the back door stuck and you had to lift it slightly while turning the knob. And there were other details too. Specifics I honestly can't even remember because I was in shock. And that was just the beginning. Through the screen door, he pulled out a folder. Inside were documents. What looked like a lease agreement with his name on it. Dated about 6 months before I moved in. He showed me mail addressed to him at this house. Everything looked official. Then came the part that truly rattled me. He pulled out his phone and started showing me pictures. Photos of him inside my house. Sitting on my couch watching TV. Cooking in the kitchen. Lying down in the bedroom I sleep in now. And they looked recent. Not staged, not obviously photoshopped. Some even had other people in them. None of whom I recognized. One picture in particular made my blood run cold. He claimed it was from the 4th of July, just a few months earlier. It was a selfie taken by a woman I didn't know. She, the man, and several others were gathered around my kitchen table, smiling, with a box of fireworks in the background. The detail, the context, it all looked completely real. And for a brief moment, I actually started questioning my own memory, my sanity. Was it possible I'd somehow blocked out living with this person? Could I be the one losing my grip on reality? But I knew that wasn't true. I'd been home on the 4th of July. Those photos made no sense. The whole situation was so surreal that I finally told him I was going to call the police to sort it out. Not in a threatening way, just because I had no idea what else to do. I figured the police could look at the records and clear everything up. But the moment I mentioned calling them, his demeanor changed completely. He suddenly calmed down, said he'd wait outside while I made the call, and then walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I watched from the window, but he was gone. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, I told them the whole bizarre story. They told me to contact my landlord and ask about the previous tenants, since maybe I'd get some answers there. I had all my legal documents proving I rented the house, but when I offered to show them, they waved it off. They said it was probably just someone having a mental breakdown, and since he was gone, I should move on with my life. Then they left. But I couldn't just leave it at that. This guy had documentation. He had photographs. With my landlord's help, I eventually contacted the previous tenants. For the record, my landlord was just as confused as I was. He didn't recognize the man, had never rented to anyone matching his description, and said he'd owned the house his whole life. The old tenants said the same. They had no idea who this person was. They told me they'd lived there alone for 3 years before moving out. So, how did this stranger have such detailed knowledge of the house? How did he have photos of himself inside it? For the next 2 weeks, I lived on edge, but nothing happened, and I started convincing myself maybe it had just been some strange, elaborate scam that fizzled out. But I was wrong. One night, I came home from an evening with friends to find my house completely ransacked. Not a normal burglary. This was deliberate. Someone had turned the entire place upside down, like they were searching for something specific. The weirdest part? Most of my electronics and valuables were untouched. The police found no signs of forced entry, which meant whoever it was had a key. And given the timing, it was impossible not to connect it to the man at my door 2 weeks earlier. This time, the police took it seriously. So did my landlord. He replaced all the locks immediately, free of charge, and installed new security measures. The working theory, the one I reluctantly believe, is that some deeply disturbed person really does believe he lives in my house and broke in searching for his belongings. That's terrifying enough on its own. But what I can't explain are the documents, the mail, the keys, and most of all, the photos. I wish I had the presence of mind to study that supposed lease agreement more closely. Maybe get his name. But in the heat of the moment, I just wasn't thinking. And while forged documents are one thing, the photos are another story entirely. Maybe they were old photos with the dates altered. Maybe. But even if that's true, it still doesn't explain how my landlord, who's owned the house his whole life, never recognized this guy. One of my friends suggested I might be dealing with something not entirely natural. I don't really buy into that kind of thing. But I'll admit this. Ever since that night, I've had a heavy, unshakable feeling hanging over me whenever I'm at home. Like I'm not really alone. I can't rationalize any of it. I just hope, somehow, that it's over.